here is Diego Garcia. No, it is not a Mexican man, but an island in the Indian Ocean. And this is, of course, British. And it should remain so, in my opinion. And one thing that is certainly British is Islander magazine. It's in its last week of being sold, so get it while you still can. What are you doing if you haven't bought it already? Only a week left, and you'll never ever be able to buy it again. So there is that. There you go. There's the merch store on screen right now. You can see the address. You can also find it via our website, and as well as the magazine, there are also t-shirts, which are cool, and a mug. So check it out. If you want to support us, we make no money from our news segment, so please do. With that out of the way, let's go to where Diego Garcia is. So here it is, that same island, and we zoom out. There is nothing. Oh wait, hang on. There we go. So you can see that this is a pretty good location for, say, a military base, because look at all of this stuff surrounding it and all of that nothing.
It wouldn't be a very large military base, would it?
No.
But I suppose if you want a bit of land...
If you want a little bit of land, that's pretty useful, isn't it?
I mean, it's about the same size as I don't know, is it the same size as an aircraft carrier or something? I mean, it's...
Well, we can cut to a better picture of it here. So here's
oh, right, there we go.
Military base. I think this was when it was being constructed. I don't know how old this picture is. It looks old. Because it's an active military base, I couldn't find any contemporary pictures of it, obviously. I could go on Google Earth and zoom right in, but I'm not going to do that because I don't want to get in trouble. Okay. But this is home to a very secretive joint UK-US military base, and it's both a port and an airfield. And obviously it's useful for military operations such as refueling and storage. And it's one of the, and this is a direct quote here from the people discussing it, extremely limited number of places worldwide available to reload submarines. So obviously quite important. It's also off limits to civilians. You need permission from the military to even go to the island. There are no commercial flights, and boats are not permitted to go there either.
Okay, well, I didn't know we had this, but it seems very handy.
It is, and I think the fact you don't know about it is probably by design. Yeah. And there were a small population of civilians on the island, about 1,000 people, that were removed in the 60s, I think 1967 off the top of my head. And actually many of them have come to live in the UK, which is interesting. But it's worth mentioning that this island will soon be gone. It will soon no longer be a possession of the British Empire, because, as a Frenchman points out, which is adding salt to the wound, it was in that little patch there of daylight that would have meant that no matter where you are, no matter what time of day it is on planet Earth, there'll be a part of British territory that is daylight. As in, the sun never sets on the British Empire.
Yes, because it's always sunny somewhere on the British Empire, but we can't have it without the Chagos?
No, because you see that patch on the right-hand side there. Yes. Well, all of that will be gone. Because, of course, with the island gone, we don't have that right-hand patch anymore.
Well, who did that then?
The closest one would be Pitcairn. Well, who you have to blame is Keir Starmer, of course. So he's saying... This headline, by the way, is misleading. Starmer hands Chagos Islands back to Mauritius. First and foremost, I don't think it's actually happened yet. He hasn't actually formally handed it over as of yet, as far as I'm aware. I could be mistaken in that. And also, it never belonged to Mauritius in the first place, and in fact, Mauritius belonged to us. It was ours.
I mean, Mauritius...
part of our empire.
Famous for the dodo, which they killed.
Mm-hmm.
But when you were scrolling out on that Google Maps thing with Mauritius a few moments ago, I mean, Mauritius popped up briefly for a second. I mean, it is close in sort of geographic terms, but it's thousands of miles away, isn't it?
Pretty much. Yes, it's very far away from anything. And also, it's worth mentioning...
So how can you hand it back to Mauritius if they've never owned it and it's thousands of miles away and they have no claim on it?
Interesting question. It's kind of BS, in my opinion. So, we actually got the island, Diego Garcia, in the Treaty of Paris in 1814 in the Napoleonic period, and I would presume, I didn't have the time this morning to look into the Treaty of Paris, but I presume that we probably got it from the French, who owned it before us.
Well, if it's called Diego Garcia...
And it could have been Spanish.
Yes.
Who knows?
I suspect there's a Spanish connection in there somewhere.
I would say so.
Yeah.
But either way, it's never belonged to Mauritius, and Mauritius won its independence from the UK in 1968. So
Well, also,
we've had the
hasn't
island
Mauritius
longer.
kind of come into the orbit of the Chinese as well?
I was going to touch on that.
Oh,
yes. They're pretty China aligned on stuff, and so the notion of a very secretive base all of a sudden becoming the property of the country that is aligned to the Chinese.
Okay. So hang on, if I've got this right, we're taking what is actually a very valuable, very strategically located military base that supports submarines and handing it over to the Chinese at a time of rising geopolitical tensions.
Yes.
And the excuse is that we're giving it back to Mauritius, who have never owned it. I think there's part of this story that we're not being told.
I'll be getting into it, don't you worry.
Oh, okay.
So, a United Nations High Court, the highest court, the UN, as an advisory opinion that doesn't have to be followed, by the way, that the UK's administration of the territory is unlawful and must end in order to complete the UK's decolonisation. I didn't realise that was something that had to be done, but okay. We just got to decolonise things that never really belonged to a country in the first place.
What decolonisation effort?
Well, it's justified as, well, you've decolonised Mauritius, why have you not given back this island that never belonged to them?
Right, now that sounds like the sort of an excuse you would give to a child, because you don't want to explain what's really going on. You know, the dog has gone to live on Auntie's farm or something like that. Mm-hmm. Clearly, the UK military is not handing this over because they're worried about decolonisation.
No, as in that's the reason the UN is trying to get us to hand it over to the island. But
that's a fig leaf for whatever is really going on.
Of course. So it's also interesting to me that the deal was rather rapidly done. It was agreed to within weeks, and to the terms of Mauritius, who seemingly, because they've got an upcoming election, wanted to go into their election with, look what we just did, isn't this wonderful? So there's a strong incentive there for Mauritius, of course, China-aligned country. And also, one thing that I did find interesting is before this was announced, the BBC ran an article only a few days, about 5 days before, 6 days, what I found on the secretive tropical island they don't want you to see. So this seems to have been dropped perfectly timed to make people aware of its existence.
It does actually look quite lovely, doesn't it? Because you've got...
Oh, it's beautiful, yeah.
You've got that kind of land thing going around the outside, and you've got this beautiful laguna in the middle that presumably is excellent swimming. The only thing that puts me off slightly is it looks like Africa.
Yes, and also there are lots of sharks in the water.
Well, even in the middle bit?
I don't know, but I've read that it's quite shark-infested around there.
Yeah, but I think you could put up some nets or something, and then that would make
That's
a
true.
lovely... I mean, if I was an eccentric billionaire and I wanted a place to hang out at the end of the world, I'd want this place.
It does look nice, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I can see why they want it. So, this BBC journalist was only allowed to visit under permanent escort. Even while they were sleeping, they had someone stood outside their door, an armed guard. Interesting that they approved of it just before it was handed over. It could be that, you know, the people in the military disagree with the political decision going on, and they're just like, well, come on, journalist, maybe we'll finally allow you here because otherwise this undermines what's going on. There's a possible explanation. Yeah. So one thing that I did find interesting, but bearing in mind this is 1,000 miles or 1,600 kilometres away from the nearest landmass, that some refugees have turned up and claimed asylum on this island. Some Sri Lankan Tamils have turned up to this island, a top secret military base, and they're saying we need to claim asylum. And apparently, according to the BBC, they've been stranded there for nearly 3 years, which...
Surely the British military cannot be that shit, right? That this is apparently such a top secret base that if you go there, you have to have a soldier standing there watching, staring at you the entire time, even when you're asleep, even when you're on the loo. You've got to have this soldier just like making death eyes at you the entire time to make sure you don't go in the wrong place. And yet they let a whole bunch of dinghies turn up, and they were powerless to stop it.
Yes, that's what happened. I know.
I can actually believe that the British military is that bad somehow, worryingly.
So one of the reasons that the hesitation to keep hold of the island is the territory has been costing the UK tens of millions of pounds, with the bulk of this categorised under migrant costs. And apparently... Let's hear what David Lammy has to say about it, shall we?
Well, presumably we had to build them a 4-star hotel on the island for the refugees to stay in.
Oh yeah, they're probably living
and then supply them benefits as well.
I don't know what on earth the world's come to, but of course, Foreign Secretary, and known genius David Lammy has said this government inherited a situation where the long-term secure operation of the Diego Garcia military base was under threat, with contested sovereignty and ongoing legal challenges. Today's agreement has secured this vital military base for the future. So it's worth mentioning here, as Lammy has pointed out, that the military infrastructure is allowed to remain as part of the deal, but the island itself will now potentially belong to Mauritius, China aligned. However,
that doesn't sound as secure as it could be to me.
If you want to run a top secret base, you don't want a country aligned with one of your major enemies to be allowed to just turn up and potter about next to your military base.
So what's the answer then? If they're going to keep this top secret military base that requires somebody staring at you the entire time if you do happen to find yourself there,
don't hand it over is the answer.
Well, yes, but what is their answer to when a Mauritian delegation takes a Chinese general for a walk around their new territory? What are they going to say? No. And they're going to say, well, yeah, but we own it now. You gave it to us.
Presumably that would be allowed. I've seen nothing anywhere to suggest that wouldn't be possible. You know, if the Chinese started flying drones over, maybe we would get a little bit upset about that and shoot them down. But other than that, there's not a lot that can be done. So it basically undermines the entire facility that's on the base.
Are we going to be paying Mauritius rent?
Yes. We're going to be paying them to take the island as well and to allow...
So we're paying them to take the island?
Yes.
Something makes me think that Keir Starmer and David Lammy are not A1 negotiators. This is not how you give something away, for a start.
I know, and the fact that we just agreed to all of Mauritius's things as well. But what Lammy says is that it will strengthen our role in safeguarding global security, shut down any possibility of the Indian Ocean being used as a dangerous illegal migrant route to the UK, really, as well as guaranteeing our long-term relationship with Mauritius, a close Commonwealth part. That's just... adding salt to the wound, isn't it?
I'm sorry, I'm derailing your segment here because I can't get over it. Why is it so important to maintain good relations with Mauritius? They have a museum about the dodo and some nice beaches and a couple of hotels.
I don't know. I could only guess, if I were being charitable, that perhaps... you want to be pally with them because they're strategically placed in the Indian Ocean, and if there is to be some sort of...
Well, until a day ago, so were we.
Yeah, I know. It's ridiculous, isn't it? Right. I don't quite understand what's going on. So I have seen it asserted around about the place that the deal requires scrutiny and ratification by Parliament itself. So if that is the case, there is a way of getting out of this, which would be good.
But Starmer rules his party with an iron fist, and he's got a majority.
I don't know whether it's going to be one of those ones where he's going to necessarily crack the whip. It could be that he's going to say, well, vote with your conscience. Perhaps he's running this along and then saying, actually, well, we tried, but Parliament voted against it. But he technically controls Parliament. Yeah. It could happen, and it's also worth mentioning as well that we're guaranteed to keep the lease for the airbase for 99 years, and then we can renegotiate again. I don't know what we'd have to negotiate, But
alternatively, we could just not do this and keep it forever.
Yes.
Right.
The US has also picked up on this. Here is CNN talking about how the United States is about to lose control of its secretive base. I mean, technically it's ours, but you know what.
Well, the US owns us, so I mean, why not?
Yeah, we're basically a vassal anyway, so, potato, potato. Yeah. And they also published a picture of the base here. Someone clearly spent a lot of time on this. So obviously it's very well built up here. There's a lot of infrastructure here that we're potentially risking in the future at some point.
Okay.
Which is a shame. So even economist journalists have been saying this seems silly. So they're saying that Mauritius's claim is quite flimsy. Well, yeah, of course, they've got none. They haven't included the 1,000 people who once lived there, which I don't care about personally. Chinese spying gets easier, obviously. It's foolish to trade hard power for soft power. Again, I agree. If I'm just in most
I like this guy because he's made all of the points that I made.
Yeah.
Which are correct.
Well, it's because a lot of these points are very common sense, aren't they?
Yes.
And the Tories have demanded answers about this, but it is worth mentioning that it was James Cleverly in 2022 that said he was open to negotiations in the first place, so they can stuff it up their arse, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
They're just trying to pretend to be outraged. Perhaps much the same for Farage as well. He's asking for a debate about the surrender of the islands. I would be surprised if anyone's going to listen to him. And the worst thing of all, I think, is this. So after there was a sort of effort with Mauritius to give over these islands, Argentina has now vowed to gain full sovereignty over the Falklands with concrete action, apparently. And as I pointed out, this is why you don't give away territory. Because if you give away one bit of territory, then everyone will think... It's like giving out chewing gum in school. You give out one, you've got to give out all of them.
Well, and also, we see now how it's done. Basically, you just keep sending dinghies with refugees until you've got a claim.
So one thing that I found interesting is how on earth did these Tamil Sri Lankans end up in an island, thousands of miles away? Literally
That's a hell of a dinghy ride, that is.
That, to my mind, sounds like someone's put them up to it and then used the UN to try and wedge a crowbar between ourselves and Mauritius to try and force us to give them over. And were somebody a bit more astute on geopolitical matters, not naming any names, David Lammy, they would have been able to spot that. But because we have a knuckle-dragging moron as, the head of the Foreign Office, these sorts of things are going to continue to happen. We're going to continue to have our influence around.
Well, not just the Falklands,
reduced.
Gibraltar as well, presumably.
That's probably on the cards as well. It's as if it's not humiliating enough to Britain that we had the largest empire by landmass ever seen on planet Earth, and within a couple of 100 years, it's basically evaporated. That indignity of losing so much so quickly is bad enough, let alone the potential of our already crippled empire falling apart in the space of what seems to be a few months of Labour rule.
Well, and the thing that occurs to me is if this is how it works now, people can turn up and then you have to give away bits of the British Empire. I mean, can't we be giving away Birmingham to the Pakistanis instead?
Well, I don't think we should surrender any of our territory to anyone. And
well, maybe Birmingham.
It can be saved.
Right.
We can say, hey, Pakistan, how about you take your Pakistanis instead, rather than
that's another way.
Our English city.
Yes.
And I think that this is a real betrayal. I've tried to keep calm here, but when I actually read the news, I was furious about this. I've just had the whole weekend to seethe about it. But yes, this is one of those things that is very, very frustrating and is an obvious mistake. I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, and if you want to see more of what we're up to, you can follow Dan's series, Brokenomics. Here he's talking about Tony Blair's new book on leadership. And if you want to see all the other work we're putting out, you can follow us on Twitter. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.